When Castlevania finally showed up on a Sega platform, it had been a long time coming. By the time it showed up in December of 1993 in North America, there had been multiple 8-bit entries on the NES, a remake for the Super Nintendo, and even the PC Engine had gotten one in Japan. I had been so excited at its announcement I could hardly contain myself for its arrival. Sega finally had a real Castlevania to call its own, and wow, what a heck of a game it turned out to be. Before we begin, there are a few things you should know about the various versions of this game. In North America, it was called Castlevania Bloodlines. In European and other PAL territories, it was called Castlevania The New Generation, and in Japan, it was called Vampire Killer. All these names were connected to the story in some way. Bloodlines indicated the main character's distant relation to the Belmont clan of games past. The New Generation indicated the two new heroes of the game that had not yet appeared in any other Castlevania title. Finally, Vampire Killer works on many levels, not just as the entire point of the game, but also the weapon wielded by one of the main characters. And speaking of characters, you get two to choose from right from the get-go. The first is John Morris, holder of the famed Vampire Killer whip. The second is Eric Lecarde, who has a magical spear that was given to his family by Alucard himself. Both of these new heroes have their own reasons for being here, and they both have different moves and special attacks. They feel quite a bit different in terms of gameplay as well. When starting out a new game, as with most greats, the first level is essentially a training ground. Easy enemies, easy obstacles to cross, and finally an easy boss battle that allows you to try out your items and special attacks. You start out in the familiar halls of Castle Dracula, taking out shambling zombies, bats, and skeletons. These guys offer no real challenge and are there for your amusement and getting used to the Genesis controller. You'll meet a mid-boss werewolf that just sits there while you beat the hell out of it, and the stage ends with an armor knight who just walks back and forth while you do the same. Practice your sub-weapon timing and special attacks here. Remember, pressing up in the sub-weapon button gives you a more powerful secondary attack in addition to its normal use. The PAL version has been censored a bit in this stage by removing the hanging cow heads and dripping blood. Stage 2 opens up in Greece while you platform your way across ruins set against a beautiful sunset and your reflection on the water. There is little to fear here, but a mistimed jump or missed attack could send you to a quick hole death. The second part of this stage has you trying to outrun rising water on a series of staircases. Stay ahead of it to avoid danger and watch the enemies as they are revealed. Your sub-weapons like the axe are quite efficient at hitting enemies above you. Once at the top, you have a series of mid-level boss encounters to deal with. None are really that challenging. Hit and run, keep the damage going, and avoid their slow attacks. You'll be past it in no time. You'll then make your way back down as the water recedes. This area is uneventful and only has the odd Medusa head here and there to give you any real grief. Keep your head above water, and this area is a piece of cake. The fifth section has you platforming your way across ruins with a handful of enemies in your way. Take your time, hit the guys that block low, and keep your distance from the skeleton enemies that shoot at random heights. Make your way down and deal with the charging enemies, and then you'll find yourself standing in front of the boss of the stage. This guy looks intimidating, but he is slow and wide open to attack. The axe works well for hitting his head, and your angled whip attack will break down his midsection in no time. He does try and drop rubble on you, but it's easily avoided as long as you keep moving. The third stage drops you in Italy, dealing with some birds trying to kill you. Your sub-weapon like the axe and boomerang work great here. The birds' patterns are erratic and you can take a few dings, but keep moving and hit them while they are low. There are some of the Minotaur guys trying to beat you down with broken pieces of the stage, but they are easily dispatched. As the stage goes on, you'll be greeted to one of the first areas that splits up the path for the two heroes. Because Eric has a high jump, he can access parts of the stage John cannot. There is a fork here that splits up the two entirely. John must swing across an open pit, while Eric must use his jump to go a different way. This gives way to an impressive stage with great swaying effects. Medusa heads fly back and forth trying to send you to a premature death, so wait for each one to come out before you jump so that you have control over placement and position. Make your way quickly through some easy enemies and you'll find yourself on a series of tiny platforms. The screen auto-scrolls here, so it's a matter of keeping up, not lagging behind, and keeping the enemies at bay. The area can lead to an easy death with a missed jump or getting hit, but you should get a feel for it fairly quickly. Once at the top, you'll face a giant bat that likes to hit and run. Your placement and position here means everything. Get hit on the edge and you'll plummet to your death. Stay in the middle of the platform, attack when it's safe, and be aggressive when he is open to be hit. Sub-items like the axe work great. With Italy behind us, it's now time to travel to Germany. Right from the get-go, we see some cheeky skeletons hiding in the background throwing bones at you. Keep on the move and take care of the enemies in your path. Once the guys in the background jump forward, take care of them as well. Once inside the munitions factory, you'll get more of the same enemies. Be vigilant, many of them will spawn a second enemy after being killed. Move along the staircasing and conveyor belts until you exit the area. This brings us to a room with some giant pistons moving back and forth. You'll need to time your jumps and positions here, because the movement of the screen is actually the enemy. Trap yourself against the piston in the wall, and you're dead. Wait for the piston to move away and then move quickly through. A few jumps and you're off to the next area. This should be familiar to Castlevania vets, a room full of gears that must be carefully traversed. It starts out fairly easily, with mainly easy platforming and some staircasing to get past. The enemies here are slow and without any real attack ability, so just cut them down as you go. Once you start the next section, you'll see a series of chains and platforms that must be crossed. Depending on the version and difficulty, this is an easy thing to do, or it can be incredibly frustrating because of enemies knocking you back to an instant death. If you have your sub-weapon powered up, pop it as you go to get rid of the enemies and make this a piece of cake. The next room introduces the Great Frankenstein's monster, who is no stranger to the Castlevania universe. In a bit of a twist, the monster has a whip-like weapon he uses to try and hit you. He also has an electric charge attack that runs along the ground. Keep your distance and attack with the sub-weapons if you have them. The next area is a series of spinning blades that will cause damage to you if you get hit. Move slowly but deliberately. You'll have a few enemies pop out halfway through that run along the ground and can hit you multiple times if you don't get rid of them fast. The ninth section of this stage has a series of moving platforms that have enemies armed with giant spiked ball and chains that can easily send you to an insta-death. You'll need some good timing here, and sub-weapons will definitely help you manage things better. Move past the small room with the possessed gears, and the boss of the stage awaits. This pile of animated gears has a weak spot in the center you need to concentrate all your attacks on. He changes size as he takes damage, so you'll need to adjust midway through the onslaught. Show him no mercy, keep the attacks coming, and he will soon be broken before your might. Our next stop is France, where we must face the Garden from Hell. You'll see plants that cause your controls to be reversed if the pollen touches you, killer vines, a fountain of blood, and plant creatures swinging around trying to clip you. Once inside, we are treated to some really nice transparency effects of shadows. The chandeliers fall every time you get close, so you'll need to move fast and get out of the way. There are axe knights here to slow your progress, but they too need to be dealt with fast. Keep the attacks aggressive and keep moving forward. Towards the end of the area, a knight with a giant sword challenges you. Keep your sub-weapon in his face, move back a bit to give yourself some room, and remove him from your path. The next room can be a nightmare if you get all of the guys firing at you at once. Attack smart and simply hit the second guy on the stack. If you don't rile them all up at one time, you can get past it with little trouble. The next area sees another fork that will split up the two different characters. If you are John Morris, you will simply move on to the next room where you will swing across a pit and face some skeletons and bomb-throwing enemies. If you are Eric, you will need to fight your way upwards. This is the much more difficult path of the two because of the eyeball enemies constantly firing at you as you move. A moving spiral staircase awaits both heroes on the other side. For John, it's going up. For Eric, it's coming down. Again, Eric gets the harder of the two. A mid-boss awaits you in the next area, but he is a pushover and easily dispatched. Stay low and keep aggressive. The 7th area of the stage is a long room featuring a few different types of enemies, as well as a mid-boss. Keep moving, use your sub-weapons, and always make sure each and every chance is taken to attack. Move on past the long rampway down and the boss of the stage awaits. This chick just sort of flies around, so beat her ass out of the sky until she shows her true form. This fight is easy in the Japanese version, but more challenging in others, particularly if on the higher difficulties. Sub-weapons are again key, as is an aggressive attack strategy. Keep an attack on her every moment possible. The 6th and final stage opens up with an assault on the Countess's castle. Medusa heads will come out firing at you. Pay them no mind and simply duck their attacks. The bridge breaks apart at the end, so jump off and move on to the next area. Aside from being extremely cool looking, this area can also be hard as hell the first time you see it. The optical illusion of the stage separates it into 3 sections, each disjointed from one another. The Japanese version on easy is the best place to practice this because of the complete lack of enemies. The trick is to watch your feet when your body is caught in between sections. When enemies are introduced, this stage can be infuriating, so take your time and try and move deliberately. Kill the enemies before you jump, as trying to hit them in the air can lead to countless insta-deaths. The next section also messes with your reality by putting you upside down and reversing your controls. Luckily, the potential for insta-deaths is reserved for the middle of the room, so move fast and get past this area. Again, the Japanese version is easiest here. Bloodlines introduces more enemies even on the easiest setting. The next room is a series of attacks by armor knights charging you from the front and the back. Keep moving, use your boomerang if you have it, and don't dilly-dally. Your first boss is Death himself. He of course isn't going to play it straight, so he offers you a set of cards that must be chosen. These are either additional boss fights or health replenishment. Save your health items for when needed and go after the enemies. Once the boss battles are dealt with, Death will finally challenge you to one-on-one combat. Keep your sub-weapons in play and attack him aggressively. Once he falls, it's on to the Countess. This battle is radically different depending on the difficulty selected. If you are playing it on easy, you simply need to fight her first form. This monstrosity has a few different attacks. The first is a fire blast that is easily avoided at distance. The second fire attack you can simply duck and not get hit, and then a tail whip that you can time and jump right over. Once she does this, she moves forward and leaves herself wide open to your merciless attacks. Beat her down, rinse, wash, and repeat. If on easy mode, she dies after and you move on. If you are playing normal or above, the battle wages on. This time she randomly teleports around the screen, firing at you from the left and right. Time your attacks well and you can beat back her elemental orbs and keep them from attacking you. You need to be exceptionally aggressive here and always make sure your attacks land, even if you take damage. If you get to her late, be sure to duck the incoming fireballs she throws. Keep on her, and this time, she's dead for real. The stage leading up to the final battle offers some of the best music in the game. The Genesis sound chip is harnessed masterfully here, and the results are among the system's best. Stop and listen to it for a minute or two, and prepare to face the big man himself, Dracula. As in other versions, Dracula is a multi-part encounter. His first form is of course the easiest. He teleports around the screen, firing at you in an effort to end the battle early. Your first instinct would be to keep your distance and see what he does. This is a mistake. You want to stay right up on him and time your attack as soon as his head lifts after the teleport. This accomplishes two things simultaneously. First, you score damage on him, and second, you destroy the attack he had ready for you. Once mastered, this strategy will quickly knock him into his second form in no time. The second form is a death-like creature that floats around the room, throwing various types of fire attacks at you. Some come from above and some track you. His movements are fast and erratic, but attack him when he is in range and use your sub-weapons if you have them. His third and final form is a giant winged demon that spits multiple attacks as the fight goes on. In the beginning, he throws sickles at you when you land a hit. These are spaced enough for you to avoid them fairly easily. Attack constantly and avoid the sickles as best you can. After a while, he gets pissed and turns red, changing his attacks to flames after you hit him. These can be jumped over easily. Again, aggressive attacks at each opportunity is the way to go. As his life bar depletes, he finally resorts to trying to throw bones at you and jumping all over the screen. You'll have none of this nonsense, and your attacks again will be swift and purposeful. Beat this demon back to the precipice from which he came, and the ending to this unforgettable classic is within your grasp. The ending you get is different depending on the version you play and the difficulty chosen. In the Japanese version Vampire Killer, you get the full ending cinema even on the easiest setting. In Bloodlines on easy, you get an abbreviated cinema that actually doesn't tell you anything and launches straight into the credits. There is also an expert mode that can be played that offers more challenge and a slightly different ending message. The easy mode in Vampire Killer is definitely the version you want the first time you play, or if other versions are proving too challenging for you. Once you get better, move on to the normal and expert modes for more challenge. I have so many fond memories of this game, from how me and my best bud got it the very first time, to its great graphics, sound, and gameplay, to the many times I have defeated it over the years. It's definitely top 10 level fun. Even as a side story to the mainline Castlevania universe, it just oozes the quality that defined other games in the series, and pushes the Genesis hardware with huge multi-jointed sprites, awesome special effects, and a general art design that is heads and tails above the normal third-party sameness that permeated the library. While games like Dracula X set out to push the series forward in brave new ways, Bloodlines here sought to pay homage to what came before it. It sped up the gameplay considerably, offered secondary attacks to the sub-weapons, and gave you 2 playable heroes right from the beginning. It took the classic formula and improved it in its own right, and the end result was something Genesis and Mega Drive owners could be proud of. Konami also did its own music in-house, and the soundtrack is considerably better than the gems-driven stuff that flooded the Western-made software. In fact, the music here is such a leap over other games released that year for the platform, it's almost like it's done on a completely different sound chip. All these years later, I can still sit and play through this with the same level of enthusiasm as I did when I was 18. That's the mark of the great ones. When something is done this well, you can play it any time without even thinking about it. I'm Sega X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.